The Kithra used to be the galaxy's GPS system. If you can imagine that, picture this. Across thousands of star systems, these beautiful crystalline beings were the reason anyone could travel faster than light. Their minds weren't just smart. They were living quantum computers, able to feel the invisible currents that flow through space itself. Think of it like having someone who could sense every wind current, every ocean tide, but instead of air and water, they felt the very fabric of reality. For over 3,000 years, every major spaceship in the galaxy had a Kithra navigator. These weren't just crew members. They were literally plugged into the ship systems, their crystalline bodies hardwired into the navigation computers. Their entire nervous system became part of the vessel. When a Kithra connected to a ship, they could feel every gravitational pull from distant stars, every quantum fluctuation that created the highways between worlds. Without them, interstellar travel was basically impossible. The Kithra weren't just tools, though. They had families, culture, art, and dreams just like any other intelligent species. Young Kithra would train for decades to become navigators, learning to interpret the quantum songs that guided ships safely through the void. They took pride in their work, knowing that millions of lives depended on their ability to find safe paths to the dangerous regions of space where one wrong turn could send a ship into a black hole or strand it in empty darkness forever. But here's the cruel truth about being indispensable in a galaxy driven by profit margins. You're only indispensable until someone builds a machine that can do your job cheaper. And that's exactly what happened. The Galactic Consortium, which basically ran most of the known galaxy, had been working on artificial quantum processors for centuries. These machines promised to do everything the Kithra could do, but without needing food, rest, or salaries. More importantly for the bean counters, machines didn't have families to support or cultural needs to accommodate. They were just tools that could be switched on and off as needed. When the consortium finally perfected their artificial navigation systems, they didn't phase out the Kithra gradually. They didn't offer retirement packages or help them transition to other careers. They didn't even give them advance warning. One day, the Kithra were essential members of every crew. The next day, they were obsolete. The consortium's announcement was cold and corporate. All Kithra navigation contracts were terminated immediately. Treaties that had protected their rights as sentient beings were dissolved with the stroke of a pen. Overnight, thousands of Kithra found themselves disconnected from the ships that had been their homes and workplaces for generations. Many had never lived anywhere else. Some were born on those vessels, raised in the corridors between the stars. What made it worse was a response from the species they'd served faithfully for millennia, the Voltari, whose merchant fleets of Kithra had guided safely through pirate-infested space sectors, suddenly claimed they couldn't afford to help. The Thessian Republic, whose military vessels had relied on Kithra precision during territorial disputes, declared that supporting refugees wasn't their responsibility. The hegemony of worlds, which had built an entire economy on trade routes that only Kithra navigators could safely travel, simply pretended they'd never heard of them. Every request for asylum was denied. Every plea for temporary shelter was ignored. These beings who had dedicated their lives to helping others find their way through the galaxy suddenly found themselves with no way home themselves. The irony was bitter. The greatest navigators in known space had nowhere to navigate to. The Kithra tried everything. They offered to work for reduced wages, to train the new artificial systems, to find new roles in galactic society. But the decision had been made at the highest levels. They were yesterday's technology, as outdated as paper maps in a world of satellite navigation. The fact that they were living, breathing, thinking beings with hopes and fears apparently didn't factor into the economic calculations. So 17 ships, carrying the last 10,000 Kithra in existence, began a desperate journey to the outer rim of the galaxy. They had no destination, no guarantee of safety, and no reason to believe that anyone in the vast cosmos would show them the compassion that their former employers had denied them. Their distress signals echoed through space, growing weaker with each passing day as their ship's power system struggled to maintain life support for passengers who had never been meant to live in such cramped, temporary conditions. But sometimes, when the established powers of the galaxy fail to show basic decency, hope comes from the most unexpected places. And Earth was about to prove that being new to the cosmic community didn't mean lacking the wisdom to do what's right. Lieutenant Commander David Walsh had been staring at the same star charts for 6 hours straight when the first signal broke through the cosmic static. Working night shift at Titan Station wasn't exactly glamorous duty. Most nights, the biggest excitement was watching ice miners haul their loads back from Saturn's rings. But David actually preferred the quiet hours when Earth's part of the solar system was sleeping, and he could focus on the deep space monitoring arrays without interruption. The signal started as just a blip on his screen, barely distinguishable from the background radiation that constantly washed over their sensors. But something about it made David pause. After 12 years of monitoring space traffic, you develop an instinct for what belongs and what doesn't. This signal had a rhythm to it, a pattern that seemed almost musical. David isolated the transmission and ran it through the standard analysis programs. The computer immediately flagged it as artificial, definitely not a natural phenomenon like a pulsar or magnetar. But it wasn't matching any known communication protocols either. The signal was structured, complex, clearly intelligent, but unlike anything in their databases spanning 47 different alien civilizations. What really caught David's attention was how the signal felt. That sounds crazy, but anyone who spent years listening to space communications knows what he meant. Different species had different ways of organizing their thoughts into transmissions. The mechanical Andromedans sent data in perfect geometric patterns. The emotional Centauri broadcasts always had this underlying warmth to them. This new signal was different. It carried an almost desperate beauty, like someone trying to write poetry while drowning. David called over his colleague, technician Linda Park, who specialized in xenolinguistics. Linda had cracked more alien languages than anyone else in the solar fleet, and she took one look at David's readings and whistled low. "This is definitely mathematical," she said, "but it's wrapped in something else. Look at these repetition patterns. They're not just sending data. They're trying to make it beautiful." The translation algorithms worked around the clock for 3 full days. Every time they thought they were close to a breakthrough, the meaning would slip away like water through their fingers. The signal kept repeating, growing slightly weaker each time, and David found himself staying late every night, obsessed with cracking the code. He barely slept, surviving on coffee and the growing certainty that this message was important in ways he couldn't yet understand. On the third night, Linda burst into the monitoring station with printouts in her hands and excitement in her voice. "David, you need to see this." The computer finally parsed the base language structure. It's not just one transmission. It's 17 different sources, all broadcasting the same message. David looked at the translated text and felt his heart sink into his stomach. The message was simple and heartbreaking. "We are the Kithera. We seek sanctuary. We have served the galaxy faithfully for 3 millennia, but we have been cast aside. Our ships carry 10,000 souls, including children who have known no home but the void between stars. We do not ask for charity, only for the chance to prove our worth to those who might show us kindness. We are the last of our kind." The message went on to describe their situation, how they'd been navigation specialists, how they'd been replaced by machines, how every species they'd served had turned them away. But what struck David most was the dignity in their words. Even in desperation, they weren't begging. They were simply asking for the chance to contribute, to be useful again. Within hours, David's report was racing up the chain of command. The UN Emergency Council convened an emergency session with representatives linking in from Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies. David watched the debate through live feed, his stomach churning as he waited for humanity's response. But here's what separated humans from the rest of the galaxy. The debate didn't last long. While other civilizations might have spent months calculating resource allocation, political ramifications, and economic impact, the human representatives saw something much simpler. Fleet Admiral Patricia Miller summed it up perfectly during the emergency session. "These aren't strategic assets or political complications. These are people who need help. And helping people is what we do." The vote was unanimous, not because it was politically smart or economically beneficial, but because it was right. Admiral Miller's response to David's station became legendary. "Guide them home. Commander." Tell them Earth is waiting. David's hands shook as he composed humanity's first official message to the Kithra refugees. For the first time in months, he was about to tell someone that they weren't alone in the dark anymore. Earth had heard their call, and Earth was answering. Dr. Robert Harrison had been studying alien cultures for 15 years, but nothing could prepare him for the journey to Luna's dark side. As the shuttle approached the hastily constructed refugee camps, Robert pressed his face to the viewport and tried to imagine what it must feel like to be so far from home. The temporary habitats looked fragile against the stark lunar landscape, a collection of inflatable domes and prefab modules that had been thrown together in just 3 weeks using equipment borrowed from asteroid mining operations. The first thing Robert noticed when he stepped into the main habitat was the sound. The Kithra didn't communicate the way humans did. Instead of voices, they produced these incredible harmonic resonances that seemed to come from deep within their crystalline bodies. It was like walking into a cathedral where the organ music was being played by living beings. The harmonics filled the air with something that was part language, part music, and part pure emotion. Dr. Angela Foster, the xenobiologist on Robert's team, was already taking readings with her sensors. "Robert, you need to see this," she whispered, showing him her scanner display. "Their bodies aren't just crystalline. They're quantum coherent at room temperature. That should be impossible, but somehow their entire nervous system maintains quantum entanglement across their whole body structure." The Kithra themselves were breathtaking to look at. They stood about 7 feet tall, with bodies that looked like they'd been carved from living crystal. Light passed through them in strange ways, creating patterns that shifted and flowed as they moved. But it was their faces that really got to Robert. Despite being so alien, there was something unmistakably intelligent and kind in their large, multifaceted eyes. The eldest Kithra navigator, who introduced himself through harmonics that the translation device rendered as chord of distant stars, agreed to demonstrate their abilities. What happened next completely rewired Robert's understanding of what consciousness could be. Chord of distant stars placed one crystalline hand against the habitat wall and closed his eyes. Immediately, the harmonic resonance in the room changed, becoming deeper and more complex. Through the translator, Robert heard him describing things that no human instrument could detect. The gravity wave from the collision of 2 neutron stars, 47 light-years away, is reaching us now, he said. Jupiter's magnetic field is fluctuating due to solar wind pressure. And there, his voice took on an almost musical quality, there's a ship approaching from the outer system, still 3 days away, carrying supplies for the Mars colonies. Dr. Foster checked her long-range sensors and confirmed that a supply ship was indeed scheduled to arrive from the asteroid belt in exactly 3 days. The Kithra had sensed it through quantum fluctuations alone. But what really amazed the human team wasn't the Kithra's incredible abilities. It was their attitude. Despite everything they'd been through, despite being thrown away by the galaxy they'd served, they seemed genuinely excited to share their knowledge with humanity. They offered to help improve Earth's navigation systems, to teach human pilots how to feel the quantum currents, to contribute in any way they could. Young researcher Lisa Johnson, fresh out of graduate school and still amazed to be part of First Contact team, couldn't contain her curiosity. During one of the evening sessions, she asked Chord of Distant Stars the question that had been bothering everyone. How can you still want to help? After what happened to you, how do you maintain trust in other species? The ancient navigator was quiet for a long moment, his harmonics dropping to barely audible frequencies. When he finally responded, his words needed no translation. The meaning resonated through the crystalline harmonics in a way that bypassed language entirely and spoke directly to the heart. A lighthouse does not ask who deserves the light. The silence that followed was profound. Robert felt tears he didn't expect running down his cheeks. Here was a species that had been betrayed by everyone they'd ever trusted, cast out into space to die, and their response was to offer guidance to whoever might need it. Dr. Foster wiped her own eyes and asked a practical question. But how do you maintain hope? How do you keep believing that helping others is worthwhile? Another Kithra, younger than Chord of Distant Stars, answered with harmonics that carried the warmth of distant suns. Because the universe is vast and dark, and every small light matters. We have seen civilizations rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct. But the one constant is that intelligence seeks connection. When we help others navigate safely, we create threads that bind the galaxy together. Robert realized he wasn't just documenting a first contact anymore. He was witnessing something that could change humanity's entire approach to interstellar relations. The Kithra weren't just refugees seeking shelter. They were teachers offering lessons that the galaxy desperately needed to learn. And somehow, Earth had become the classroom where that education would begin. Within 18 months of that first contact on Luna, the entire solar system had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. What started as a simple refugee rescue had become the most significant advancement in human space travel since the invention of the fusion drive. But the real changes weren't just technological. They were changing how humans thought about space itself, about cooperation, and about what was possible when two species genuinely worked together. Captain William Turner still remembered his first flight with a Kithra navigator. Turner had been flying cargo runs between Earth and Mars for 8 years, considered one of the best pilots in the merchant fleet. He thought he knew space like the back of his hand. Every asteroid field, every gravitational anomaly, every safe harbor between planets. But when harmony of solar winds connected to his ship's navigation system, Turner discovered he'd been flying blind his entire career. It was like learning to see color for the first time. Turner explained to reporters after that historic flight, "I thought space was just empty vacuum with some rocks and gas floating around. But when Harmony showed me what she was sensing, I realized space is alive. There are currents and tides, warm spots and cold spots, highways of gravitational flow that make travel faster and safer than anything we'd imagined." The first human Kithra hybrid vessel, the UES Pathfinder, cut the normal travel time between Earth and Jupiter from 6 months to 3 weeks. But that was just the beginning. Working together, human engineers and Kithra navigators were mapping routes through space that previous civilizations had considered impossible. They found shortcuts through regions where gravitational fields from multiple stars created stable corridors, like rivers flowing through space itself. The Kithra weren't just sharing their old knowledge, either. The younger generation, those who had been born free from the servitude contracts, were developing applications that their ancestors never could have imagined. Dr. Michael Davies, working at the Joint Research Facility on Luna, watched in amazement as teenage Kithra used their quantum sensitivity to predict solar weather patterns with incredible accuracy. Storm Singer Bright Paths is only 15 years old, but she can tell us exactly when solar flares are going to hit, how strong they'll be, and which communication satellites will be affected, Davies explained. We're talking about weather prediction that's accurate months in advance. This is revolutionizing everything from interplanetary travel schedules to power grid management. But the applications went far beyond space travel. The Kithra's ability to sense quantum fluctuations was helping human scientists solve problems they've been working on for decades. Climate researcher Dr. Jennifer Hayes had been struggling with atmospheric modeling for years, trying to predict how changes in solar radiation affected Earth's weather patterns. When a young Kithra named Whisper of Ocean Tides joined her team, they cracked the problem in 6 months. She could feel the interactions between solar particles and our magnetic field in ways our instruments couldn't detect. Hayes said, "It was like having a sensor that could measure the butterfly effect in real time. Our climate models became 10 times more accurate overnight." The integration wasn't always smooth, though. Cultural differences created challenges nobody had anticipated. Kithra communicate through harmonics that carry emotional undertones, so human sarcasm and jokes often got lost in translation. There were awkward moments when human directness clashed with Kithra sensitivity, and practical problems when Kithra meditation schedules conflicted with human work shifts. Commander Rachel Brooks, who managed the integration program, remembered some difficult early days. "We had a situation where a Kithra navigator went into harmonic distress because a human crew was arguing about sports during a critical navigation sequence. To them, discord in the crew created actual interference with their quantum sensing. We had to completely rethink how we managed team dynamics. But both species were committed to making it work. Humans learned to create more harmonious work environments, while Kithra adapted their communication styles to be more direct when needed. Mixed crews developed new protocols that honor both cultures. quiet zones for Kithra concentration, and designated areas where humans could be their normal chaotic selves. The real breakthrough came when Captain Turner's daughter, Amy, became the first human to train directly with Kithra instructors from childhood. At 12 years old, she couldn't sense quantum fluctuations the way Kithra could, but she learned to interpret their readings intuitively. She became the first human who could truly work as a partner with a Kithra navigator, not just as someone being guided. Amy thinks in space-time the way other kids think in 3 dimensions, Turner proudly told anyone who'd listen. She's not just learning to navigate, she's learning to feel the universe itself. By the end of that first year, the partnership had created something unprecedented in galactic history. True cooperation between species. Not the old master-servant relationships that had defined interstellar politics, but genuine collaboration where both sides contributed their strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. The Kithra had found not just sanctuary, but purpose, and humanity had found not just better technology, but better ways of thinking about their place in the cosmos. The consortium envoys arrived 2 years after Kithra had found sanctuary on Earth, expecting to find a simple diplomatic situation they could resolve with the usual combination of threats and bribes. What they discovered instead was something that would shake the foundations of galactic politics forever. Ambassador Helen Brooks watched the consortium fleet approach through the viewing port of Titan Station, the same facility where Lieutenant Commander David Walsh had first heard the Kithra distress calls. The 12 massive ships looked impressive against the backdrop of Saturn's rings, their hulls gleaming with the arrogant polish of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. But Helen wasn't intimidated. She spent the last 2 years working alongside the Kithra, and she knew some of the consortium didn't. Times had changed. The lead consortium vessel, a kilometer-long dreadnought called the Eternal Authority, demanded immediate surrender of all Kithra refugees. Their transmission was typical consortium diplomacy. No pleasantries, no negotiation, just cold demands backed by implied force. The Kithra are consortium property under Treaty 847 Alpha, the message stated. Their temporary relocation will be tolerated, but they must return to designated service stations immediately. Helen almost laughed at their choice of words. Property. Service stations. These beings still thought the Kithra were equipment to be reclaimed, not people who had built new lives and contributed to a thriving partnership with humanity. The diplomatic meeting took place aboard the neutral station orbiting Jupiter, with representatives from both sides gathering in what everyone knew would be a historic moment. Helen entered the conference room flanked by Kithra representatives who no longer carried themselves like refugees. Harmony of Solar Winds, now serving as a Kithra ambassador, moved with quiet dignity beside her human counterparts. The transformation was remarkable. 2 years of freedom and respect had changed everything about how the Kithra carried themselves. Consortium Admiral Vextar, a tall being with metallic skin and cold eyes, didn't even acknowledge the Kithra presence. He spoke only to Helen, as if the crystalline beings weren't worth addressing directly. Ambassador Brooks, your species' temporary care of our navigation equipment has been noted. However, the Kithra must now return to proper service. We are prepared to compensate Earth for any expenses incurred. Helen felt her jaw clench at the casual dehumanization, but she kept her voice level. Admiral, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The beings you're referring to are now citizens of Earth and her colonies. They're not property, and they're certainly not going anywhere they don't want to go. The consortium delegation erupted in what their translators rendered as scornful laughter. Admiral Vextar's aide, a serpentine being with scales that shifted color with his emotions, spoke up. Ambassador, you clearly don't understand galactic law. The Kithra were created for navigation purposes. Their citizenship claims are relevant under consortium authority. That's when Harmony of Solar Winds rose to her full height, her crystalline form catching the station's lights in patterns that seemed to pulse with inner fire. Her harmonic voice filled the room with resonances that needed no translation, the sound of dignity refusing to bow. We were not created for any purpose, Admiral. We evolved, we chose our profession, and we served faithfully until we were discarded. Now we have found partners who value us as equals, not tools. The consortium representatives looked genuinely shocked. They'd never heard a Kithra speak with such confidence, such self-assurance. For centuries, the crystalline beings had served in quiet submission, their voices rarely heard in their own defense. Helen smiled and activated the holographic display at the center of the conference table. Perhaps you'd like to see what equal partnership has accomplished. The display showed technical specifications for Earth's new quantum-enhanced fleet, ships that could travel faster and more efficiently than anything the consortium had ever built. These vessels are defended by technology that makes your dreadnoughts look like wooden sailing ships. But more importantly, they're crewed by humans and Kithra working together as partners. Admiral Vextar leaned forward, his metallic features twisting with something between anger and disbelief. You're threatening the consortium? Your entire species has been in space for less than a century. We've ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Helen's response was calm but firm. We're not threatening anyone, Admiral. We're simply explaining reality. The Kithra are Earth citizens now. They're protected by human law and defended by human fleets. If you want to change that situation, you'll need to go through us. The silence that followed was electric. For the first time in galactic history, someone had told the consortium no, and had the power to make it stick. The crystalline beings who once served as living navigation computers now stood as equals beside their human partners, their voices harmonizing with human determination in defiance of their former masters. The galaxy watched through live broadcasts as humanity demonstrated something the great civilizations have forgotten in their rush for profit and power. True strength didn't come from enslaving others or treating people as property. Real power came from lifting others up, from building partnerships based on respect and mutual benefit. When the consortium fleet finally departed, their threats empty and their authority challenged, something fundamental had shifted in galactic politics. The Kithra had found more than shelter among the stars. They'd found home, and humanity had found something even more valuable. Proof that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, creates strength that no amount of military might can match.